able to speak with all of you. So, lots of very, very, very powerful energy coming up in the next couple of days. So, instead of keeping this one just to tier 23, I decided to do the equivalent of a tier 23 analysis for all of you. Now, for those of you who don't know, Tier 23 is my premium membership program, and you get a whole ton of information on that. But when it comes down to, crunch time, when we are at the cusp of very, very powerful shifts, what I tend to do is I tend to make sure that it's accessible to all. And this is a time of powerful shifting. There are so many phenomenal alignments that are coming up in the next few days, and we need to make the most of it. So let us just go and begin. I'm not going to be doing the hellos today, even though in my heart I am sending all of you tons and tons and tons of hellos, just because I want to focus on point. So let us begin. Woohoo! Just as a recap, the 11th of December now, when I look at the dates, I look in terms of universal time, because that's the closest approximation I can get to a time zone that's, I guess, convertible by all. So Friday, the 11th of December, we basically saw a couple of important alignments. We're starting with that first. So 11th of December was yesterday. What we saw then was the sun at 19 degrees of Sagittarius opposite the mean node at 19 degrees of Gemini, which means the sun was conjunct the mean south node. So yesterday we actually saw a very powerful energy asking us to think about what narratives of the past are we walking away from? What ways of thinking and feeling and being and knowing are we letting go and leaving behind in the past? And how and what exactly are we headed towards in the future? So that was a really big alignment there. Now I'm picking the really big ones. If I went into all the micro detail ones, we'd be talking here for at least a day. We also saw Venus at 24 degrees of Scorpio, trying to Boracisi, the energy of the false light, at 24 degrees of Pisces. On the same day, Venus also conjuncted Ceto, the energy of the great sea serpent. So when you have a Venus-Ceto conjunction trine Boracisi, you got to look these up, tier 23, or you already know how to do your homework. That's Ceto and Borasisi. This was a time where we basically had to look at the question of bloodlines. What spiritual, epigenetic, ancestral DNA is being created and reproduced through the question of relationship? Who binds with who marries who walks away from who, and what is being carried forwards. So this is the kind of energy that was really, really, really coming through, and it was very, very important for all of us to stay discerning as to see what kinds of old ideas of lineage, old ideas of serpentine or draconic connection, what old ideas of magic are coming through our choices of relationships at this time, and how are these old choices being justified. So, there's a lot of victim-y, drama-y, martyr-y type of energy coming up. The energy of that Piscean notion that suffering is somehow the most sacred thing in the world, when really, so these kinds of energies may have also tried to impact the way we think about and see our role in relationships. So that was another big one yesterday, December the 11th. Today, December the 12th, we see Mars at 19 degrees Aries sextile the mean node. So whenever you got a sextile, if you have anything that opposes the midpoint of that sextile, that becomes a yod, or a finger of fate. Some people call it a finger of God. God, goddess, divinity, fate, call it what you want. So when you have a potential, the point of potential yod would be at 19 degrees of, recalculating, 19 degrees of Scorpio. So if you had anything near 19 degrees of Scorpio, today you would have certainly been feeling the Mars node sextile, and you would have had to make some significant decisions in one way or another. So this is basically a time for all of us to really think about, in what way do we walk and talk the path that we take in this world? In what way do we think about the sacred masculine? In what way do we think about how we choose to embody that? In what way do we think about the journeys and the paths that we are on? And what is the next step that needs to be made? It's all about rising within from that sense, from that spark of you-ness, whatever that you are we back? Yes, we're back. So for those of you with anything near 19 degrees of Scorpio, that should have been a yod or a finger of fate. Now, we also saw yesterday Juno opposite Sedna. Juno at 27 degrees of Scorpio opposes Sedna at 27 degrees of Taurus. Sedna is very much the energy that deals with the woman in Inuit mythology who was betrayed by her father. She was someone who was basically, thrown into the icy waters and she's holding onto the boat. Dad cuts off her fingers and throws them in after her. And as she basically surrenders, she transforms. So that's very much the myth of Sedna. She becomes the great protectoress through comes up, especially in Taurus. This is the kind of energy that really forces us to think about the way in which we anchor pain into the body. And we may actually find significant soul connections open. It's certainly it's certainly a time where we are absolutely asked to be very clear in how we process that trauma and with whom. I noticed that the vibe is quite high today, so even though even though we've got high, we persevere. Saw yesterday Mercury at 16 degrees of Sagittarius squared Vesta. So all these things are happening. Just actually, it happened earlier today. The Mercury Vesta square is is one of those things that have absolutely been asking us to be clear about who or what or why are we committing to something. Are we clear in the path of service that we want to walk? Are we clear in our head? Are we clear in our heart? Are we clear in our spirits? Are we clear on definition of service? Are we doing something in the name of service just to escape or run away? Are we taking a very skewed meaning of service as one that actually harms ourselves and our truest and most intimate connection with spirit? This is the kind of energy which asks us to question all of the above and to really look at commitment. What to say, because the universe is listening and it will take you seriously. Hey, okay, here we go. The 12th of December, we're also going to be seeing the rotation of Venus by the moon is basically like a mini eclipse. So we're getting the moon, and then we're getting the earthbound observer. And we're actually seeing hidden dynamics in relationships, in questions surrounding money, finances, material whatnots. This is the kind of energy that is drawing all of these hidden questions out from the other side of the shadow. So that's what's happening also today that hasn't happened yet. So you can see all of this is extraordinarily intense, and it's intense for a reason. So moving to the 13th of December, we basically see Saturn opposite Solaris. Solaris was a centaur who basically he was in love with another centaur called Hylanome, and Solaris runs into a spear and dies. Solaris runs into a spear and dies. And what happens here is that Solaris opposite Saturn reminds us to not jump the gun. No matter what it is that we are working towards in trying to find an emotional connection, a space, a sense of home, Solaris's role is to remind us that we have to absolutely be clear into what we are doing, what we are saying, and to really look before you leap. Because when you try to emotionally go into things right now without forethought, without preparation, we're likely to get ourselves and possibly our loved ones hurt as a consequence of our actions. So it is the word to caution. Look at your emotions, ground into your emotions first before you make any powerful decisions on tomorrow, December the 13th. We also see Mercury at 18 degrees of Sagittarius squared Neptune at 18 degrees of Pisces. It's worthwhile noting that Mercury, Neptune, and Vesta are all in a mutable T-square because Vesta is also aspecting all of this at 16 degrees of Virgo. So Mercury, Neptune, and Vesta are all about the questions of what is the spiritual, what is service, what is the energy that actually helps us transcend illusion, and how does our conscious mind and that conscious mind's connection to the higher mind allowing us to do all of the above. But lines can get very easily blurred. Communication can get very easily distorted. So again, as with Solaris, the reminder here is to be clear and to proceed with clarity, not only of intention, but of emotion before we go ahead and actually do something. We also see another warning come about with Venus at 27 degrees of Scorpio opposite Sedna at 27 degrees of Taurus. The Venus Sedna opposition is yet again one that asks us to be mindful of old patterns that arise from betrayal, old patterns that arise from wounds at the hands of the patriarchy. Remember that patriarchy is also enforced by women. Remember that not all men are patriarchs. The gender binary does not that easily fit onto that mold of man bad, woman good. That doesn't work. So remember to look at different aspects and agents of the patriarchy when you're trying to figure out what those wounds are for you. And it's very important to be transparent and to act in integrity in any kind of partnership or relationship or business oriented questions that you may have sometime at this particular time. Now, so in other words, the 13th of December is really very much an energy that says there's a lot of stuff moving around. You really need to be sure before you decide to commit to something. Don't just feel something and go, this is what I want to do. Do your due diligence. Be prepared. That's some of the key things that are coming up at this time. The 14th of December, we actually see, and this is what all of this is built up is headed towards. We see Eros at 23 degrees of Libra, opposite Eris at 23 degrees of Aries. This is a powerful opposition. Eris is like, oi, I want to be included. Eros is like, hello. So this can be actually a very dynamic, very interesting, very sexy, very passionate alignment. But at the same time, this alignment can very equally turn into something very negative. Where Eros is not a very good decision maker, especially when it comes to relationships. He basically shoots around arrows and gets people not even interested in each other to be with each other. And finally, in his own journey with Psyche, it's because his own arrow hits his leg. This kid does not understand decision making and discernment. He is basically a mummy's boy. Eventually, at the end, he cuts a deal with Zeus to actually make sure that Psyche can actually ascend in heaven. It is not what people romanticize. You need to go back and look at the myth. So Eros is very much, sometimes it can be very childish, very immature energies that are more based towards, sudden infatuation, a kind of a flash in the pan, something that looks sexy or whatever, but really it's a can of worms. You don't want to open it. So in a negative way, the Eros-Eris opposition can actually just trigger people, who have already been oppressed, who have already been marginalized with some kind of promise of intimacy or sacred union. And when Eris figures out that you've been bullshitting her, the fallout is not pretty. But at the same time, Eris can, but this takes a lot of spiritual discipline, that rebellious, revolutionary energy of Eris can actually take you into deeper spaces of sacred intimacy when you are willing to accept it for what it is. When you are not bullshitting about what it is that you want to create, what it is that you want to have in a partnership, when you are not using your words and intentions to mislead another in a certain way, that is when the energy of Eris, rather than being a raging forest fire, can actually warm the way you express yourself, especially in some form of a union. So the energy can be positively aligned and harnessed, but only with the right kind of discipline. So on the same day, we also see Pluto, this is the 14th of December, we also see Pluto squared Eros yet again. So Eros actually having two fairly powerful alignments. Well, it's actually three if we consider the solar eclipse as well, because the solar eclipse on the same day is also sextile Eros. So it is all about these unions that we want to make or that we are being instigated to make. Whether or not it's a good thing depends on what is the energy in front of you. With Pluto squared Eros, the energy that comes through is one that yet again asks us to look at the integrity, authenticity, the application of boundaries, and the ability to regenerate the self and whoever it is you are passionately and deeply connecting with. And if you're single, this still applies to you, because partnership is not just something that is limited to the out there. You can equally have a partnership with different aspects of yourself that you have not fully connected with. So this can be a very, very positive alignment. But if Eros is actually, kind of walking on shaky moral ground and Pluto finds out, then you're going to be having a very big clash. It is also a reminder not to be opening yourself with excessive vulnerability to people whom you cannot trust or whose intentions or uses of power may not be aligned with your own. So it can be a very impulsive time. In the usual Tier 23 program, I basically would call this a shiny object syndrome day. So just be very mindful with what you engage with. Then we see the occultation of Mercury by the moon. Mercury basically gives us more insights as to what is being hidden behind in the essence of communication, and perhaps even what is being masked in a deceptive manner by the communication that you hear and receive at this time. So it's very, very important to be listening. Also on the 14th of December, we see Mercury yet again opposite the mean node, meaning Mercury is conjunct the south node. So what happens here is that we are yet again going to be asked to look at what are the paths and perspectives of the past which we are being asked to let go of. How is Mercury, how is the communicator being asked to step into a new role? How do you use your language to affect change in your immediate vicinity, in your immediate environment? Because one approach is never, ever, ever going to last. You have to keep innovating, you have to keep changing, you have to keep evolving. And that is one of the scariest things to do in the world. And that is what needs to be done. So this is one of those energies that's going to be coming up. Venus is going to be in a very powerful connection with Juno at 28 degrees of Scorpio on the 14th of December as well. So this is the time for those of you who are working through soulmate connections. This is the time you gotta be crystal clear about what you're doing and with whom and why. There is no more time for anyone to be wearing a fig leaf. There is no more time for anyone to be beating around the bush. Be clear, be clear, be clear, because that is what is being called of us right now. And not everything and everyone who appears as a soulmate necessarily is. Sometimes it's a wound mate, sometimes it's a karmic contract you have to dissolve. We tend to romanticize collectively because of the way that we've been programmed at a collective level, the way we've been conditioned to think about soulmates. We are often told that, this is it, this is your prince charming or your princess charming, and this is how it's all going to end happily ever after. No. Sometimes Juno activations can be very, very painful. They awaken your soul. No one ever said they were supposed to be pretty, at least no one sensible. Now, on the same day, then this is why it's so important. This is why I'm doing this video. We are going to be having the total solar eclipse at 23 degrees of Sagittarius, not too far away from the galactic center. So eclipses basically help us seed energy and experience energy in 18-year intervals, which can span across hundreds of years as per the particular Saros cycle. So this particular energy is bringing stuff back from the previous 18-year cycle, and also allowing us to seed something for the next turn of the wheel, the next 18-year cycle. So all of these questions, who do we connect with? What is our voice? What are our words? All of this comes together for the solar eclipse. And this is why we need to be so careful with this discussion now. So more than ever, this is when you have to realize what is your truth, what is the way you speak it, why do you speak it, with whom you speak it, and what is the value of integrity that you carry when you do so. Does your talk match your walk? If boiling it all down. This is a good time for people to also be thinking about really, turning or opening new chapters in their journey towards spirit, which is really the journey within. So people are going to be wanting to start new things at this time, and that's not bad as long as you have done your due diligence, because astrology does not guarantee your success. It tells you what are the pitfalls and what are the opportunities that each date will give you. A person can have the greatest chart in the world, but if they don't do the work, nothing's going to happen. A person can have a very challenging chart, but if they do the work, they can achieve something extraordinary. The astrology does not tell you which way it goes because it does not determine your free will. It does not even tell you who you are. At best, it's your ABCD for starting to learn that process. Now, on the same day with this eclipse, the total solar eclipse, we're going to be seeing this moon actually doing a bunch of things, trining Eris, sextiling Eros, conjuncting the galactic center, and squaring Borasisi, the false light. This eclipse squares the false light asteroid, which is Boraci C. So this is why we need to be so diligent. What you are setting now will carry a ripple effect. You, me, nobody has got the time or the luxury of being lax with our spiritual discernment and practice at this time. So, you know, have a look. Moving to the 15th of December, and here we can start to wind down the discussion a little bit. There are several repetitions to what we have seen so far, but the 15th of December sees Venus entering Sagittarius, which is phenomenal. And with Venus entering Sagittarius, we are going to have that oomph to actually go forward and look at everything that we've deeply felt in all of the stuff that we've decided meant something to us, and to take that energy and to move forwards and to acquire what it is that we want. So that energy is coming through the 15th of December. We see the sun squared Boraci again. The false light energy is still very strong in the skies, which is why we got to be clear. And on the same day, Chiron stations direct, meaning we are changing one aspect of our relationship to a particular wound that may have been, something we've been especially working through, a wound that is usually connected with a particular sense of selfhood. I would not be surprised if I saw, certain I can't tell you if it's going to be a breakthrough or an intensification, but I would say let's all pay attention to the news, especially surrounding the current state of the world's health. So let us pay attention to that, especially around December the 15th. December the 16th, we see Venus at 0 degrees of Sagittarius, square Thereus, the hunter stalker, at 0 degrees of Virgo. Your relationships are not out of the woods. You still got to be careful. What are the tools? What are the paths? What are the understandings that you carry as they relate to relationships and their connection to service? How can the concept of service can actually be co-opted into, creating something that maybe deviates a relationship or connection or contract or partnership to a direction that it doesn't need to be? So this is where your ideological or philosophical or astrological or belief system of any kind needs to be very clear on this. Very, very often, what tends to happen is people get co-opted by their own idea of what service is. We learn something, we think we know something, and we just get stuck in that cycle. And I see many facilitators who do this. People have been working for 30, 40 years. They go, I'm not happy, I'm not fulfilled. What did I do wrong? I was a good person. So sometimes when we actually deal with the question of service, we tend to forget who we are. That concept becomes larger than us. And that is where we need to be very, very clear and very, very careful. When we talk about service, it needs to be something that is sustainable. So in your relationships, in your connections, in your partnerships and businesses, you got to look at the question of sustainable service so that you don't avoid giving away your mental, intellectual, emotional, or other types of energies to stuff that doesn't matter. If you are a facilitator of any kind, you need to be drawing your boundaries even stronger. If you are someone who anchors the feminine energy in a very powerful way, be aware that certain elements or dynamics of predation can come through on the basis of your own generosity. There is such a thing as being overgiving. So this is a particular time where you want to be clear about that. We also see on the 17th of December, moving along, here we see a very, very large and profound shift. We see Jupiter opposite Solaris first at 29 degrees of Capricorn, opposite Solaris at 29 degrees of Cancer. That general vibration of please look before you leap. Don't just jump. The gun is still very much there. Jupiter is also sextile Juno. And, Jupiter and Juno are different archetypes, a different pairing of the masculine and feminine. I can't say that they're particularly healthy, but Jupiter and Juno give us the opportunity to create a connection that is based on power. Whether or not that power is coupled with respect is what needs to be seen. So what we see is also on the same day, we see Saturn entering Aquarius almost at the same time, just almost about 1.5 hours later. As Saturn enters Aquarius, we see the energy of the shift that we have been waiting for and looking forwards to. So that is the epic epic build up to all of this, and it's coming through on the 17th of December. With the moon following Saturn very, very quickly, we're going to be feeling and seeing this shift as it relates not only to the collective structures as they are manifest in the 3D, but also that interface between our emotional bodies, our astral bodies, and our etheric bodies. So that's going to be coming up very, very strongly on the 17th. And the way you experience it depends on the work you have put in. So that is very, very important. And, on the 18th of December, we are also going to be seeing another phenomenal alignment of the Sun conjunct the galactic center. Shoot your arrows through to the heart of truth that helps us shape our connection with this galaxy, with this experience of living. This is when we take all of that fresh energy, all of those currents, and we direct it to what we want to see manifest in the world. This is why I'm doing this particular Tier 23 live, because everyone needs to know this. And you don't worry about this planet, that asteroid, that number. Feel the energy, move the energy, and sling it to where it needs to go. And the 19th, we see yet another one. We see Mercury conjunct the galactic center. We see Jupiter entering Aquarius on the same day. It's the same energy, but through a different channel. So as you can see, this period of eclipse and then Saturn shifting and then Jupiter shifting is just going to do something amazing for all of us who have been preparing for it diligently and dutifully. No more time for bullshitting, because the shift is just around the corner. So that is what I wanted to tell all of you. There's just a lot of energy in the air right now. I know that this is a lot of information, but this is what you get in Tier 23. And in fact, this is a very condensed version, if you can ask the members. So go with this, feel the energy, look at what you need to be doing with it, and you will have your answers. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Take care. Very, very, very many blessings and lots of love to all of you. Ciao, ciao for now. Bye.